4.0 presentations. We have two. The first one being capital project planning from Young and Wright Architectural and Buffalo Construction Consultants.
How are you? I'm Jim Hickey with Young and Wright Architectural. I'm here with Steve Sharowski and Joe Aramini from Buffalo Construction Consultants. Here, I'll let you press that. All right. So we're here basically we'll go through the agenda real quick. So we want to talk about the long-term plan for Lancaster. We're going to talk about the SES study. We're going to go through the renovations, which are currently underway of the 2015 project. So we can kind of go through some of the photos of the things that have been worked on and are continuing to be worked on. We're going to talk about the upcoming projects as part of that. And then we're also going to start to talk about the future and long-term plan as far as Lancaster for work that's coming up and the building condition survey items that we've been presenting to you periodically. I think the last time we met in front of you was January of this year. So, all right, so the SES study is, as you know, we've completed a building condition survey that really focuses on the actual building itself, the physical nature of the building. The SES study evaluates the future and current enrollments and then starts to provide some recommendations to accommodate the growth of the community and as it's moving forward. So this report was completed in June of 2018 and was presented to you. So we've started to look at that. You want to flip to the next slide? So as you know, part of that study was has projected that for Lancaster, the enrollment is going to be increasing. And as their recommendation was to expand the existing facilities by adding some classrooms to a number of the buildings. So what we've started to do is look at the 4 basic scenarios that they've provided to us. So with these 4 different scenarios, what we've started to do is to look at each of the buildings that they've identified for an addition to be presented there, whether it's 4 classrooms or 8 classrooms, for us to look at some of the things outside of just the addition and whether or not it's even feasible to have these types of classrooms added to the buildings. Some of your sites are rather small, so having 8 classrooms added to the building might not be something that is actually capable of happening. Then you start looking at programmatically. In some scenarios, do you have enough gym stations? Or the kitchen and the cafeteria is large enough to really accommodate all of the additional students for 8 different classrooms being added to this building? Then you start looking at the infrastructure. With the existing boiler system at its capacity, and would it be able to handle 8 additional classrooms, or do we need to accommodate upgrades or renovations that are pertaining to those types of things? And then the last item is codes. As you know, our buildings are rather old, so some of the things are grandfathered in. And once you touch it or start to renovate a space, you need to bring that space up to the current level and the current codes. That applies to additions as well, but at a much grander scale. Once you start doing additions, you now need to start looking at the building as a whole and start making changes that are code implications. So we might have to start enclosing stairwells, adding fire doors or smoke zones, start adding access ways, around the building for emergency vehicles, things that would add cost to a project so that we can better understand and you can make better decisions based off of the 4 different scenarios that the SES study provided to you. So we want to be able to give you some good information to make decisions that are best for Lancaster.
So before you go to the next slide, can I just jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Just so the board and the community that's listening understands. So last September, the Board of Education met with Young and Wright at the board retreat. And at that time, the board said, hey, listen, we would like to do another capital project, make sure that the continuity of the team is in place, and also we know that it takes 2 years to do something. It was a good move last time, getting ahead of the game 2 years in advance, so we'd like to do that. If you remember correctly, Young and Wright did a presentation in January, and I know this was in the first slide, but I just want to hammer it home. So the Young and Wright came and Buffalo Construction came and they did a presentation in January and said, we're ready to go. We have it all set and ready to go. But you have this SES study going on. And we may learn a lot from this SES study, okay? And this SES study could change the parameters of the project and those kind of things. So we're here now. We finished the study Saturday of June. A focus group came in. Thank you to those 40 odd people that, not odd people, 40 some plus people. It's what? Is it really? Okay. Take it off. Take it off. All right. I'm not taking it off. So those people came in, and now we're looking at it. Now it's SES 2.0. Because the SES team comes together and they say, all right, just come up with ideas that could solve the problem, a problem that's existed here in 70 plus years in Lancaster. But now we kick it to the architects and the construction managers to find out, okay, if we were to add eight rooms to this particular building or whatever, what are the implications? And Jim has alluded to those. Would we need to expand cafeteria space? Would we get into new codes and have to expand? They're going to go into detail on that. Also, at the same time, we learned many great things that we can incorporate into this project to cut costs for the future. And they'll get into some of those right now. And third, I think most importantly, is the idea that, now we're primed and ready to go after these things, not only from an architectural perspective, but also the board and the community will want answers to really important questions. Like, okay, you say that one of the options is a Princeton model pre-K through 3 sister schools in the north and the south. But what would busing look like? And can we do it safely in each one of those schools? Dropping, let's say, pre-K, kindergarten and first grade off at one school, and then going down a mile and a half down the road and doing second and third graders, whatever. So I have a SES 2.0 committee group of people led by elementary principals, transportation, etc., going and answering the questions for the board and the community had to do that. Simultaneously, we'll have answers to both those questions at a later date, probably this coming May or June of this coming year. So not only will we have the study with all the data and everything else that's been shared on the website, but then we'll also have the answers to some of those questions. Transportation and those things. So I just wanted to hammer that home. So we're at the point right now where we can't make a decision in SES without the answers to those questions, but we need to move forward on a capital project, and you'll see why.
Thank you, Doctor. Just looking here to go into a little bit of detail to explain what we've been looking at in particular. We've got a couple diagrams to show everybody. The first one here is of Court Street Elementary. One of the scenarios looked at expanding that building by 8 classrooms. What that could look like from a site perspective, we have the drop-off loop in front with the building plan overlaid behind it. If you add 6 classrooms and 4 classrooms, 10 classrooms in total, where would those fit on that site? That site does have a lot of land, but does it start to infringe on access to the fields behind it? Additionally, one of the newer code regulations is that new buildings and additions are required to have emergency vehicular access around the entire perimeter of the building. What that could mean in this instance is constructing a driveway around the entire back of the facility. In a sense, killing some of the soccer fields and the ability to be back behind the building. Doesn't mean it's the end of the world. There's alternatives and options, but until we start looking into the specifics of these, there's no way to know what the implications or what the costs of a project might entail if you wanted to put additions on one of your facilities. Similarly, a building like Como Park, which has 2 means of access to it already, with the drop-off loop in the back and the parking lot in front, might be situated in a way that would allow for a small addition to be put on it. But that building, as with all the other buildings, it has to be looked at in terms of how large the cafeteria is. Are there enough gym stations? Are there enough toilets in the building for an increased student population? Does this building need an elevator? There are 2 floors in the building and there is no elevator currently. There's never been a need for one, but if you're doing this work, what code implications are there that put you in a spot where you'd want to make the right decision for 20, 30, 40, and 50 years down the line? So just to summarize that, there's a lot of work to be done looking at these various components and pieces. you have a large district with a large number of buildings, 4 buildings sort of in that K through 3 grade level, which would be impacted by this, and each of them with their own unique site conditions and considerations. John Sholey, that's very much a neighborhood school sort of at the dead end of a cul-de-sac. You have, Court Street and Como Park, which I referenced here. So it takes time to look into those various pieces, and as was already mentioned, we're going to be continuing to go and look into those items, look into the research, come up with cost implications of what these additions and scenarios would entail, and then being able to take that information, bring it back to you as a board, bring it back to the district, and sort of mesh that with the other ongoing investigations that were referenced, busing studies and all those other components that make up what could happen in the future moving forward here. So with that discussion on SES, I'd like to step here and take a moment to give you guys all an update on the progress of Renovations 2015 and the ongoing work in the Building Condition Survey. And to start that off, I'll pass the mic over here to Joe Armini from Buffalo Construction.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to be at a board meeting and actually have a voice finally. So we'll start with Hillview Elementary. So Hillview, we completed last summer actually. It was actually a 2-summer process. I can move to this side, absolutely. So it was actually a 2-summer process for Hillview Elementary. The summer of 2016, we were able to go in there and do some floor abatement and redo the floors in those spaces, which allowed us really to get in the spaces in the winter of 2016, 2017 to start doing the MEP work and doing above ceiling work. And really what we did is we've upgraded basically all the classrooms inside that facility. New lights, new ceilings, new heating system, new unit ventilators in those spaces. SED requires us to have air exchanges, which that building didn't have. Everything was original in that building. So a lot of new upgrades that look good, but also were functional and met code requirements. So really the building got a facelift, but it was a lot more functional when it comes to code standpoint and everything else that we did in those spaces. So library was done, nurse suite was done. A lot of work was done in that building in a 3-year span, basically going back from the 2012 capital project and then spanning through the summer of 2017. So Hillview, it's a pretty good highlight we got of Hillview there. So next is the bus garage, which has been an ongoing project. Really a very cool project, nice building. I'm sure everyone has gone there, seen it. Obviously the last board meeting we did a walkthrough in there and showed you guys that space. So really state-of-the-art space, 18-acre site, completely developed from farmland basically. A lot of logistics involved in that. The weather wasn't really great when we started this thing, so really the important thing was for us to build a road and get to the building and start building the building first and put the site together around that building itself. So about 11,000 square feet of just maintenance space. I'm sure you guys have seen the existing transportation building. There was definitely not that much space in there, and it included all their part storage and everything else was within those bays. So really this building is just, state of the art. These are the dispatch offices and the office space, as well as the break room for the drivers. Again, everything else is state of the art, all new utilities in there. Everything is brand new from the ground up. So very cool space, very fun project to work on. It was actually my first building I built from the ground up and fully developed the site. So actually a pretty cool project for me to accomplish too. So, and here's the crown jewel, I like to call it. Really the Lancaster High School in North Gym, another great space that we're working in. So we're on the downswing of it right now, ready to open up in September when school comes back. Really this thing started last summer. We were able to get some abatement done over the summer, really started demoing the space in September and worked through the winter. So we staged it into three phases basically of how we were going to build it. Existing structure, we were able to leave some of the existing structure in place and build through the winter. We were very fortunate that December was mild and I was able to get a roof on the west portion or that front portion of the building so we could work basically January, February, March inside the building. And then came April, we started putting together the actual gym space. These trusses right here, they were 30,000 pounds each. All right, they built them all on the ground in 3 different pieces, put them up in the air. Very cool process watching them go through this whole thing. And it's just really an amazing space. It's massive. These bowstring trucks are extremely unique to any construction that I've seen, and I think Young and Wright probably has designed before. So very, very unique space, very nice space. This would be the grand entry that they're showing here. One of the pieces I kind of wanted to talk about was kind of the master plan of this capital project. The master plan really was first the bus garage. We were able to accomplish that, move all the buses over to Walden Avenue. The next step was really to get this north gym accomplished, get that turnaround installed up front, similar to what we have on the south side of the high school, is now on the north side of the high school. Expand the parking on the north side, because that's obviously been an issue in the school district. So once we finalize this piece, it really rolls into the last portion of this master plan, and that's taking over the Java gym and continuing construction inside the high school with the Black Box Theater. So I will let Steve kind of take over from there.
As Joe mentioned, this really was sort of a vision from a master plan, taking and repurposing the site and changing the way the entire high school was structured. The final phase, which we've been sitting with the state for a good period of time now, it's sort of delayed some things and sort of held us up in some ways, but allowed us to reprioritize some other things in others, is taking over the old Java gym space and converting it into a couple different uses. The primary use being a black box theater and an art gallery, sort of facilitating and developing an arts core to the building. So next to the auditorium, you have a black box theater. At the north end of the building, you have all your athletic spaces and athletic entrance. And then the south end of the building is your academic core centered around the library and the media center, which as part of this is also going to be getting a facelift. To sort of facilitate and expand on the academies programs at the high school, one of the major requests for this project was the development of better learning interactive spaces in the media center, taking it from what was a very nice, very large library, but developing a couple unique spaces at one end of the library, small lab type spaces that could be used by small groups of students or medium-sized groups of students, and allowing them to interact with teachers and interact together. So that project will be going on at the same time as the Black Box Theater construction. It's been on the boards for a while. Across the district, as part of Renovations 2015, was also an initiative to upgrade your library facilities. So we've already seen the library renovations take place at Hillview. There are upcoming library renovations at the remainder of the buildings. We have a couple diagrammatic examples here of what's going to happen in these spaces. This is the Como Park Library, which will go from being just a reading space primarily to a zone that's split in two halves with a reading zone and then sort of a STEM learning space on the other side with flexible furnishings, hard flooring that could allow the setup of tables or activities for the students to participate in. This has been a really unique process for us, working with the faculty to sort of develop what the needs are at each space. You're dealing with elementary school kids. You don't always think of that as a STEM, necessarily a STEM space, but it absolutely starts at a very young age. Como Park is the one example. Court Street is the other example we have here. Same concept, slightly different color scheme, different size space, but the same general idea. Books on one side and interactive learning on another. To sort of wrap up and round out Renovations 2015, we have a couple other pieces of work going on at the middle school and John Sholey. Some of that is obviously the library's work, which is going to be ongoing there, but also some major infrastructure work. The chimney at the middle school is in dire need of restoration and repair in the very near future, so that's part of this, as well as repairing and replacing the bus loop in the front of John Sholey, which is well past its life. So, in summary of that Renovations 2015, it was a project that really formulated, as Jim mentioned before, starting in 2013. It took about a year for us to meet with the district and learn what needed to happen and what needed to take place, have that project built, developed, designed, and then start the process of getting the individual phases of that project into the state education department. So Renovations 2015 was voted on in 2015, and really we're going to see the final fruits of that project come to fruition in the summer of 2019. So a 4, almost 5-year turnaround from that point.
Okay, so now future work. Basically what we've been charged to do, and we've had a number of presentations to you in the past few months, kind of identifying what happens after the 2015 project is completed. As Steve mentioned, our plan is for that to be done by the end of 2019, but we still know that there's still quite a bit of work that has to be done. So we wanted to kind of briefly talk about the building condition survey. For some of the newer board members, BCS, or Building Condition Survey, is basically mandated by the state. Every 5 years, we have to go in and evaluate every building and look at all of the existing conditions of that building and determine kind of its useful life, when it's starting to beyond just something that can be maintained. It has to be something that needs to be replaced or completely renovated. So you're talking about your floors, your ceilings, your windows, your concrete, asphalt, those types of things. So we really wanted to start going back to that 2015 survey and identifying the things that still needed to be addressed and things that need to be that really have to be attacked now, because they're within sort of the first 5 years, or something that has to be corrected. So looking ahead, what we're planning on doing, and as Stephen mentioned, one of the reasons why we're starting this conversation as early as we have is there's a lot that goes into sort of the planning of what this project and what this project scope should be. And then once you go out to a vote, and if the vote passes, you still have about 10 months worth of design work for the architects before we even get it into the state, which could be another 8 to 10 months for them to review it. So anything that we're discussing now that really need to be done immediately, you won't actually see construction happen for another 2 years. So that's why we're really bringing this up as something that really needs to be discussed at this time. So what we're going to do is go through some of the highlights of some of the scope that we're going to talk about for each of the buildings, and kind of identify and show you some of the photos of why they're of serious concern that really are required to be addressed at this time.
So I get the fun task of showing all the ugly pictures. Just going in no particular order, going through the buildings in the district. Some of these pictures you guys may have seen before. If you're familiar with the buildings, you'll recognize a lot of the various areas. The district does a terrific job of maintaining the facilities that you have, but when you get buildings that are 50+ years old, there's a point where you can't do the basic renovations, you can't do the basic maintenance anymore without replacing entire systems. So at Como Park, some of the main needs really focus around and circle around the bus loop, windows, doors, the 1950s classrooms in particular, and some safety, security upgrades needing cameras, additional key fobs, and access points. Apologize if I'm getting in the way of any of you seeing the pictures here. We have some windows that have already been boarded up with insulation and plywood on the outside of the building. The rear bus loop behind the building doesn't have a designated area for students to really get dropped off, and that lot has been crumbling for the last 5 years. The classrooms, some of them have colorful pink and purple painted cabinetry from 1955. And then the front entry hall, terrazzo's durable, but you get 50 years of salt and kids trudging in every day. It's pitted, it has holes in it. It's something that really can't be repaired. Court Street, windows, masonry, doors, some heating systems, the parking lot, some code requirements. I'm going to start to develop a theme here as I go through some of these. The windows are the same generation Aero windows as they were at Como Park. Some of them have had to actually be screwed in place so that they don't fall out of the building. We've got plaster work from some water infiltration that's crumbling at some of the doorways. The lights, not only are they not LED, they're not energy efficient. A lot of the lenses are yellowing. They're 20, 30 years old in some instances. And the front parking lot, whereas a couple years ago the bus loop was repaved, that looks really nice. There's the new flagpole out there. There wasn't money at that time to address the remainder of the parking lot, which has been patched and patched and patched again, and is probably going to see some significant potholes again this coming winter that'll need to be repaired again in the spring. Hillview, as Joe mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of work at Hillview over the last 3 and 4 years, but there still are some loose ends that need to be addressed. Security cameras is always something that's a need. Some of the classrooms, the east wing of the building in particular, the old floor tile was not something that was removed in previous projects and is popping off in some areas. A lot of the classroom doors in that east wing are in rough shape. And the auditorium at Hillview is something that needs some attention. The carpet's old, the seats are creaky and crumbling. There's some lighting issues that they've had to deal with, and the music department has adjusted over time, but not really within its useful life anymore. The high school, it is your biggest building in the district. There's been a lot of work on renovating the north end of the building, which really took the place of making major modifications and renovations to some of those old locker rooms that were on that side of the building. The same could be said for the current Java gym. If anyone's been in those locker rooms next to the current Java gym recently, the fact that those are going away is a blessing, I think, in a lot of ways. But facilities upgrades, same thing here. Windows, masonry, the metal panels on the outside of the building between the windows, the tennis courts and lighting, some of the science rooms and the millwork in the science rooms dates back to the 1969 era, not necessarily functional. The windows here have a lot of plaster damage around them from water infiltration. The air handling unit and the air system in the field house. If you've been in there when the units are running in the winter, you'll know that there's almost a breeze blowing across the entire space. That unit is not really designed for what that space is being used for nowadays and needs to be modified and changed. And then the tennis courts. Before it becomes a real safety hazard, those should be replaced. They're already cracking and starting to fall apart. In addition, there is some work that was talked about in the previous project. Some of the items pertaining to LEAF and to those items where the money was not available to actually have that work completed and sort of take the district to that next step of completing the exterior renovations and making it really a wow space from behind the new gymnasium to the back of the site. The turf field with field lighting behind the field house, paving Stendhal Drive, making it a nicer driveway back to the baseball fields and the softball fields at the rear of the site, and then finishing up some of the more decorative elements near the front entrance just to the north now that the buses are gone and the transportation building is not going to be used for buses and maintenance anymore. Having that be a more welcoming environment for the students, for visitors to the football games, to the soccer games, to lacrosse, to the track and field. John Sholey, back in the same generation again as the other elementary schools. Classroom floors, ceilings, code-required ventilation. Some of the toilet rooms are older and beat up. The rear parking lot is crumbling and in rough shape. There's no accessible route from that parking lot to the building. The current locker rooms are not even being used as locker rooms in the elementary school. They're being used as sort of a mixed-use space right now. You can see some of the ceiling tiles falling down from those areas, reconverting those for what they could be used now, whether it's toilet facilities, special education classrooms, and taking advantage of that open space in the building for better usage. The middle school, maybe the most beautiful original building in the district, 1922 original construction with multiple additions tacked on to the back of it. The front of the building is in rough shape in a lot of ways. The first floor and some of the elements have already been renovated and fixed up. That first floor with the new flooring, the new lighting, new ceilings. The upper floors haven't had the same treatment yet. They need flooring, they need lights. Classrooms have mismatched tile that's nicely waxed and kept in good shape, but how much longer that's going to last. Lighting in the corridors, non-LED, the same issues. They're old, they're not energy efficient. A lot of the windows around the building, particularly in the 62 side of the building, are delaminating. The seals are breaking and they actually leak in the winter. And then the wonderful reality that a lot of the basement and the crawl space areas, not accessible to students, but that encases all your piping, has hazardous materials embedded in it from the original construction, making maintenance very, very difficult, and a lot of safety precautions that have to be taken into account when your staff does the work in those spaces. And then William Street School, last but not least, it just happens to be at the end of the alphabet. The building is 20 years old, which means it's now becoming eligible for state aid. What that means is that you haven't been able to perform work on that building aside from maintenance projects for 20 years. And unfortunately, some things aren't built the way they were 1,000 years ago. 15, 20 years, if you have your own home, the boilers break, the roofs start to leak, windows start to break, especially parking lots with buses and driving on it every day really begin to fall apart. Those would be the primary focuses of a major renovation project and repair project at William Street. So the sidewalks all around the building are falling apart, they're sinking. Same thing with a lot of the pavements. There's no real drop-off loop for buses in the front of the building. Carpet in the commons rooms in the areas is 20 years old. Carpet doesn't last when you have 500 kids running on it every day. It fades, it gets stained, it tears. And then a lot of the lighting, this is a perfect picture. You have a really nice pool in there, and it tends to look green at certain points because the lighting is not sufficient for that space. There are also old high bay fixtures, which means metal halide. They take a long time to turn on and turn off, and when they burn out, which is often, they have to be replaced, then you're getting ladders and scaffolds in place for the maintenance crews to go up and down and change out bulbs. And after 20 years, we've heard the stories that there's another bulb going out every other week at this point. So converting those over to LED fixtures in all of the gym spaces and the high maintenance spaces is a safety hazard, is sort of a safety remedy, but also a long-term maintenance benefit for the district. So what does that mean? All of that work combined, looking at about a $77.1 million capital project package here, with this work that focuses primarily on students, safety, and building infrastructure needs. So the pie chart breaks down a lot of the work in various buildings. You'll see a good chunk of this is actually dedicated towards some of the elementary schools, in this case in William Street, obviously, and the middle school. Maintaining the investment is always something that we try to advocate for, as it's something that you're going to be dealing with for 50, 100 years down the road. Same thing you would with your house. You replace the roof before it leaks.
So just to bring it home again, so people listening out there, as far as the things that we've done in the past, the studies and everything else to prepare us for the future, and this one is immediate need. And this is the one that the board asked for last September. We did a presentation in January, and that's our number. So tonight and at the next board meeting on August 27th, I will be recommending a capital project to go out to vote this December for $77.1 million, and to keep the ball rolling and make sure that we're fixing all the schools and getting ahead of these building condition survey things, and for the safety and security of the students in the school district. So that's what's happening tonight. This is a presentation in preparation for that board vote and approval on the 27th, and then again in December of 2018 for the community to come out and vote for it.
Anybody from the board have any questions, concerns? One of the things that I think we'd like to point out too is, a lot of these things, the number looks big, 77.1 looks big, but as we've discussed, in the past, a lot of this is aidable, especially with William Street, reaching that 20-year mark. Looking at it from the outside, it looks like a beautiful building, and I think it still is, but it has a lot of things that, like anyone's house, it wears down after 20 years. So I think these are, hitting all of the safety and security of our students, and trying to upgrade where we can and make things, it's the next step in the process, I think, for us. And it's something that I support, and I hope the community supports as well. So.
And as far as that is concerned, one important piece to hammer home too is the idea that that's a 0% tax impact. $77.1 million, the voters will be voting on a 0% tax impact.
Thanks, guys.